Today, we are joined by Shilpa Alva, founder and executive director of Search for Water, a global nonprofit advancing women led, community driven solutions for safe water, sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health. Shilpa, thank you for being here with us today. The concept of global water equity is gaining momentum across the sector. From your perspective at Search, how do you define water equity in the context of Search works? And what role can industry leaders play in making it a reality?
Yes, thank you for that question. So, Surge's entire model is based on creating an equitable world. And, that can mean many things, but here we are in the water sector, and that is Surge's mission. What we do is comprehensive water solutions. We call it Water Plus. So, what that means is that we start with water and then we go beyond water to include sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual health. And all of us can agree that water is a basic and fundamental human right. But even while it's this basic right, there are over 2 billion people that lack access to this precious resource right in their homes. And then when you talk about sanitation, you've got about 4 billion people, and then hygiene and soap. There's like billions of people that lack these basic needs. And we work towards that at Search for Water. We work towards equitable access to that. But even when you talk about equity, right, then you start looking at like who's left behind, right? There's definitely people in urban areas. I live in the US, and there's areas in this country as well where people don't have water access. And the way Surge looks at it, because the issue is so big, we look at some of the most remote, most rural parts in the world. So one of the places we work in Asia is in Sumba, in Indonesia, in East Nusa Tenggara, so a remote province on the eastern side of the country. And everywhere we work in very rural, very remote communities where people are even more left behind, right? So we're working on providing equitable access in these places in the world that are self-described as forgotten lands. And that's really like how we go about it. And the second part of your question is, how does industry join us in this? And we can't do this alone. We are a nonprofit organization, non-governmental organization, NGO. It's called different things in different parts of the world, but we are entirely funded through the generosity and the partnerships and the collaborations with industry, which includes corporations, with foundations, with philanthropic organizations, and with individuals. And we all play a role, right? When we understand that equitable access to water or to water plus solutions is important, we're going to be implementing it in partnership with our community-based organizations around the world. And we need companies and we need industry to join us in this, right? To provide the partnership, provide expertise, to provide funding. And that's how we can actually make tangible differences.
Such model is built around women-led, community-driven solutions. Could you share how this approach has improved outcomes in countries like Uganda, Haiti, and the Philippines?
Just to clarify, so currently we're working in Uganda, Haiti, and Indonesia. We used to be active in the Philippines, but that project has ended for us. So those are our three countries that we're currently active in. And in all places that we work, we partner with community organizations. So we're not going in, and it's very intentional. We don't go into these countries as Surge Uganda, Surge Indonesia. We find local leaders who have their own initiatives, and we partner with them and we strengthen their initiatives. So even beyond community driven, we call it community owned, because yes, they're driving it, but they're truly owning it. And so we start with the partnership level, right, with that organization, but then we go further from that, because it's not just the local partners that are delivering that work. It's each community where a well is drilled or a rainwater harvesting system is built. Each of those communities now need to have ownership of the solutions. And we do that in multiple ways. One is that they are involved in every step of the process. So from, ideation, assessing the needs and the capacity of the communities, to, co development of the solution. Sometimes it even involves them bringing bricks for construction or bringing the food for the workers. And then once it's all completed, we hand over the solutions to the communities. In Indonesia, actually, there are very like beautiful ceremonies, handover ceremonies, where we inaugurate the solution, and government leaders show up, village leaders show up, school leaders, community leaders, and everybody comes together, and we're like, okay, now you're taking this over and you're responsible for the ongoing maintenance, right? So they were definitely involved in driving the solution, but more importantly, they're involved in the ownership, like not even involved, they took ownership over, I should say. And this leads to the long-term sustainability. And that's the model we repeat everywhere. Of course, there are challenges along the way, but that's just the value and the approach of how Surge does our work from a community ownership standpoint. From a women's piece, the global water crisis disproportionately impacts women and girls. Yet we are the least represented in advocating for these solutions. If you look in most of the water orgs, if you look at the water industry that we're in, it's male dominated. And we work really hard to bring more women into the conversations, and not just into the conversations, also into management and leadership roles. So I was actually just on a call with our local partner in Indonesia, and we were just having this conversation. Like, we understand that in some of the remote rural areas we work in, they are highly patriarchal societies. And we're not trying to come in with some sort of foreign view of like gender equity, like, and break social norms. Like, that's not our model. We really want to respect the local ways, but we like looking for ways within the local context where women can be lifted, where their voices can be heard. And that's done through job creation. It's done through the women who lead our partnerships. It's done through ensuring that when we're working on a solution in a community, that we are interviewing the woman. And sometimes that means going into the kitchen or going into like where they're washing the clothes, and like just making sure that along every step of the way, women's voices are brought in, that they feel heard, and that the solutions are designed around their needs and solving for their needs, and as much as possible giving them roles in management and in the actual implementation, so that young girls can see women that look like them like leading these solutions, and then know that that can be part of their career, and that government leaders, especially male government leaders, can see women in a different light, right? So we're really doing our best everywhere we work to ensure that that happens.
Let's talk about your newest initiative in Indonesia. What specific challenges is the project addressing, and how does it build on your experience in other regions?
Yeah, so Indonesia is very exciting. It's already been, I think, almost over 4 years. So it's still new for us, but it's not that new anymore. We've been growing quite significantly there. We've had some exciting progress. And yeah, so on the island of Sumba that we work in, we're specifically right now working in Sumba Tanga, which is central Sumba. And we're starting expansion into Sumba Timur, so East Sumba. And Sumba is in one of the least developed provinces in Indonesia to begin with. So whenever you look at all of the any of the development indicators, right, that are published globally, you see Sumba at the lower end of that, right? And water access and sanitation access is one of those indicators. To exacerbate the situation, what we have in Sumba is an environment where it's called karst like land. So it's like limestone. So there's groundwater is limited. They have very long dry seasons, and a very short rainy season. And with climate change, like weather patterns have become more erratic. And so we're dealing with a lack of water in general. Plus, you're dealing with like a lack of development. Relatively speaking, of course, there are a lot of incredible initiatives, government initiatives, and other social initiatives that are in place, but it takes time, right? And so that's the environment we're in. We also have this beautiful island with an amazing indigenous culture, the Marapu belief system. And so you've got all of this like incredible tribal and ancestral knowledge, and these beliefs that are very much a part of everyday life. And so you have all these different pieces. And when Surge works in a place, like we want to look at everything. We want to look at the history, the cultural context, the political context, economic, social, right? And you put all of this together and then you design a solution or co-design a solution with a local partner, which in our case is an organization called YLRA. They're Indonesia, they're all across Indonesia, but we're working with the Sumba branch of this organization. And yeah, together with them and with the local government leaders and the communities, we design solutions. So what we're doing in response to the water and sanitation crisis there is we're mostly focused in schools right now. I'd say primarily focused in schools. Over the last year, we've been doing an initiative across all elementary schools. We've had so this is a great time to bring in, industry partnerships. We work with Liquid IV, we work with Avery Dennison, MDRT Foundation, so a couple of industry players as well, to basically bring water access to every elementary school in Sumbatenga. And we're very close to being done with that piece of it, sustainable or improved water access. And then, that Liquid IV has been supporting us quite heavily in that particular part of the program. And then we have other partners who are helping us build the toilets in the school or helping us with the hygiene training or the menstrual health training. And the goal is to work on elementary schools. Then as that's starting to get complete, now we're looking at junior schools. And then we'll be looking at senior schools. And we'd also be looking at the preschools, like pre-elementary. But we wanted to start somewhere that was tangible and build off that. Also, we're looking at one geographical region, right? Central Sumbatenga. And as that work continues to saturate or get complete, we start looking at other regions. Now we're looking at Sumba Timor. And so that's how we work, step by step. It's such a big crisis that it can be quite overwhelming. With the right partners, with the right communities, with the government supporting, like we can do this and we make it very tangible. I mean, like one school at a time, one village at a time. And I did not mention the solutions we're actually doing, which is what you asked me, are rainwater harvesting systems in many of the schools. We're also drilling wells if there is groundwater.
So can I say that basically different country, different region, you have to customize the way how it's being done?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's
And it's
especially
interesting. Yeah, sorry, go on.
so it's catered especially in terms of that region and that country. So I guess not all one solution fits all. Can I say that?
Absolutely. And it goes even further than that, right? Because what defines the solution in each country is, first of all, dependent on the need in that country. But also, another part of our model that I think is really important to mention is that we do our best to source everything locally. Because what we want to do is we also want to boost the economies in these places. And it doesn't mean that the product has not been imported by a local merchant. That's okay, but at least you're supporting that local merchant when you're purchasing that product, right? But we don't import things ourselves from other places. We really want to see what are the technologies that are available locally, what are the materials available locally. And this is important for multiple reasons. One, it helps with, driving the economies in these places. But the other aspect of it is that if something breaks down, then they can get the replacement parts, right? They're not dependent on us to fly it from somewhere, far away, because there are local sources. And, of course, Indonesia, because we're talking about that example, there's many islands. So things could be coming from another island, of course, because, it is one country, but we still focus on how can we source everything locally? And that changes the solution, right? Because what's available in Indonesia is not what's available in Haiti and is not what's available in Uganda. And of course, as you had said very accurately, the needs are different as well. So we adapt based on what we have.
With over a decade of work in Uganda, how do you measure long-term success, not just in infrastructure, but also in health, education, and behavioral change?
Yeah, so we've all read the statistics that water changes everything. And when you have access to water, education, income, health, and all these things improve. So we have measured and seen improvements in education, which includes like attendance, enrollment, performance. Health is actually a lot harder to measure because there are so many other things besides water that impact a community. And also like health center data in some of the places that we work with in the rural communities is limited. We can see it visually and we hear all the testimonials. Like when you talk to the mothers, they'll talk about their children no longer being sick. They'll talk about, right, their families being healthier so they no longer have to buy medicine. When you talk to the healthcare workers, they will say, yeah, we're getting less cases of waterborne illnesses. But then you can have certain bacteria that passes through and then people can get sick right away. So we are still, when you measure, so there's a couple of things. You can measure outcomes immediately, right? You can talk about the infrastructure and you can talk about the immediate. Impact needs more time and it needs seasons and cycles. So we're actually now in the process of doing impact assessments of our work, our longer term work in Uganda to properly be able to measure this while also knowing we went through a global pandemic in the middle, which set us back quite a bit, right? So yeah, we can see it visually. We have the anecdotal stuff, we have the testimonials, we definitely have significant measurements and data we've collected, but we're also taking a step back in this next year to get an external evaluator to look at the impact long term, because there's both going to be things to celebrate, but also lessons learned of how we can do things better in the future.
What does sustainability mean to Surge? How do you ensure that these projects are locally owned, maintained, and impactful well beyond the initial implementation?
Yeah, sustainability is probably one of the most important aspects of how we work at Surge, because if there's like all these statistics out there that 5 out of 10 wells in the rural parts of the world are broken, right? So there's no point spending all this money if it doesn't last, and you can't guarantee things are going to last as well, because it is infrastructure and things can break down, right? But you can do your best and you can put in the right systems and processes to minimize that, right? To like help it last for as long as possible. And that's what we do, right? Like every part of our model actually works towards the sustainability. By involving women, you're involving the people who are benefiting from the solution. So they're going to care the most about it, right? So that's actually, it's important to do for multiple reasons, but sustainability is one of them. I already mentioned our community approach, right? Like we're working with local organizations, right? We are partnered with local organizations. So it's, they're in the communities long after we would exit. Surge has worked in 12 countries and we're only active in 3. The local orgs we work with are still present, right? I mentioned we used to work in the Philippines. The local organizations, they're still present and very active, right? So that's a very important piece as well of like, who are you working with locally and will they stay beyond your help? And beyond the organizations, right? It's not even about the organizations delivering the work. Throughout the process, we involve the villages, right? We involve the program participants. So they know how the well was built. They can repeat this stuff, right? They know where the materials are from. They were part of the implementation. So they can continue the maintenance of it. And while we do all of this through the process, we also invest a lot in monitoring and evaluation, or O&M, operations and maintenance. That's a term more commonly used in our industry. And what that is, that we, beyond the projects, we have teams that we invest in that the only job is to go around and look at infrastructure that was done in the past and to provide refresher trainings to the committees and the teams that are responsible in those villages and schools for maintaining the solution. So we are constantly also doing new work, but evaluating and paying attention to our past. So it's really ingrained in our process. And of course, things are breaking down, and of course, things like that will happen. But what's important is that we continue to evolve from it, and you continue to provide the local teams the support and the local communities the support to, continue the functionality of that solution.
Menstrual health remains under address in many WASH programs. Why is it a core part of your work, and how has Surge helped to normalize this conversation?
Menstrual health is a core part of our work because of our woman-centered, woman-led approach. And very early on in our work, right, we went through the same journey as many WASH organizations. We started with water, we brought in toilets, and we're like, something's still missing, because we're looking at the school enrollments and we're seeing at the adolescent ages, right, 12, 13, 14, girls are still dropping out of school, especially, in some parts of Africa that we work in. And we asked more questions, and a lot of that has to do with menstruation, right? It has to do with the lack of period products. It has to do with the lack of dignified places, right, to go to toilets. And we looked at curriculums that existed, and a lot of the government curriculums are very, very like they're hard in a way that they don't they don't look at the full journey of what a like the hormonal part and the beauty of like coming into womanhood, right? So we wanted to enhance what already exists, because they do exist. Programs do exist in school. Like children do learn about these things, but we wanted to do it in a way that was softer and more beautiful, and really like ties into the leadership of the girl, right? And the development of the girl in a way that's more holistic, right? So yes, something physiological is happening, biological is happening, but something emotional and spiritual is also happening to you when you first bleed. And like, what does that look like, right? As you go through that journey. And how does that allow, like, how do you tap into that to strengthen the confidence in the girl? When you look at this in a long term way, it's about encouraging more girls to be more active members in the society. And how do you start with that at one of the times in their life that is so sensitive? So yes, it's very connected to wash, but it's also connected to the leadership of women and like what we want to invest in. And the way we think about it, Serge, is like a three-tiered approach. So the first tier is the infrastructure, right? Drilling the wells, building the toilets, the rainwater harvesting systems, the hand washing stations, right? All the infrastructure work. The second phase of the work, if you're thinking about like a ladder, right? The second rung of as you go higher up is the education. It's the training on menstrual health, it's on hygiene, it's on maintenance, it's on sustainability, soap production, those kinds of things. And then the final phase, well, not the final, but at least the third phase of our work as you continue to go up this ladder, is on leadership, and it is on economic empowerment. It is on enterprise development. It is on how do we now, we've got these relationships in these communities. How do you now bring people along this continuum, especially women and girls? And so now you take young girls who've gone through menstrual health training and provide them with leadership opportunities. You take the women who now have water access closer to their homes and provide them with economic opportunities, all still related to wash. But that's very, very like thoughtful for us, because we've designed our programs in a way where we want to help enhance that leadership of women and girls, starting with water access, starting with wash access. And we're not there. We haven't reached the third phase of our work yet. That's still our vision. That's a plan. We're still in phases 1 and 2. And we are piloting phase 3 in some of the places that we're working in, because it takes a while, right? We have to be ready for that. You first need basic needs to be met. And menstrual health is this beautiful connector between infrastructure and leadership, as well as obviously providing girls with the tools and the resources and the knowledge they know to have their periods and menstruate with dignity and not be limited with something that's so natural.
Finally, what message would you share with the WIFTEC participants, particularly engineers, utilities, and technology developers, about how they can partner meaningfully with organizations like Search to scale impact?
First of all, I want to say to anybody working in the water sanitation space, you're already doing great work, right? And I think it's a job that a lot of people don't see and doesn't get the credit, because it's like a lot of times behind the scenes, right? Because especially like, even where I live, like you open up a tap and you get water, right? So these are really like what you're doing is already quite incredible, and you're doing mission driven work. The message that I would share is that, just consider the parts of the world, in your own homes, in your own countries very often, right? That don't have access to these basic needs and don't have the same access that we have. And there's many ways to get involved, right? Like if you are at a leadership position in your company, please reach out to like partner with us from a funding perspective, right? Company where it's like corporate social responsibility, philanthropy, marketing. There's many avenues or departments this can fall under, because it's the right thing to do, right? And you have the funding. And beyond it being the right thing to do, it helps from talking to your customers about it. It helps talk to your suppliers about it. And it really helps with employees. So when you talk about, we see changing across the world, we work in many different countries. Young people today want to be part of something much bigger, right? They want opportunities to feel proud that their company is supporting rural access to water in a place that was self-described as forgotten, right? And so it's a win-win across the board. And there are volunteer opportunities with us, right? Like we want those skills. We want people to like join our like to help us and support our initiatives through like expertise. So it doesn't have to be Surge, right? It can be other organizations in your own countries, in your own spaces that like look at how, if you can't get it through your company to your official work, then see how you can do it personally, right? Like what organizations are in each of your societies, in each of your communities, and how can you tap into that and be part of that? Because these are really complex issues, and nobody, Serge cannot do this alone. I can't do this alone. You know, we need even these kinds of partnerships, this kind of interview, right? We need our voices to be lifted. We need partnerships. We need collaboration. So everything is important. And it just starts with that, you know, that intent, and then definitely action that follows that intent.
Shilpa, thank you for sharing the inspiring work. We look forward to seeing how the industry can support and scale these efforts. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more stories from Water and Wastewater Asia.